TRE in the afternoon.
Good afternoon. Joining us on the line now is Martin Milnes. He's a London-based author, producer, director and performer. He's co-hosting a new podcast with Peter E. Jones called Loving You, the Untold Sondheim, which features chats with star-studded friends, family and collaborators of Sondheim, including Dame Julie Andrews, Dame Judi Dench, Mia Farrow, Bernadette Peters and Alistair McGowan. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed, Hannah.
Oh, it's lovely to chat with you again. And what a fabulous idea for a podcast.
Thank you. Well, I was lucky to be close to Stephen Sondheim in the last 6 years of his life. And Steve introduced me to his close friend and indeed former partner, Peter E. Jones. And when Steve died in 2021, there were many tributes to the work. And of course, Steve's musicals changed the shape of musical theatre with his shows like Sweeney Todd, Company, Follies and Into the Woods. But there had never been a tribute to Steve the man, Steve the friend, Steve the partner. So Peter and I decided to bring together Steve's closest friends, collaborators and family and chat to them about the Steve who we were lucky to know and love.
Oh, yeah, it's a lovely idea because there'll be fans, as you say, of his musicals all around the world, fans of the music and things like that, who probably know not much about the man himself at all.
Yes, well, during his lifetime, Steve, it was often joked that Steve had his story and he was sticking to it because when he told stories about his own life, he would do so in the same words practically every time. It's almost as if he would go to the little card box in his head and find, right, this anecdote, this is how I tell it. So the world has never heard about Steve in the words of his friends. And it's such a different person to the image of the scary, brooding intellectual who so many people think that Sondheim was. And by chatting to people who'd known Steve in some cases up to 70 years, we've been able to paint a beautiful portrait of somebody who was extremely different to the public perception for his entire lifetime.
Yeah. So tell us more about him then. What was he like as a man? How do his friends describe him?
The word which keeps coming up so many times is love. And indeed, we've called it Loving You, not just because that is the name of a song from his musical Passion, but because all the guests spoke about how much they really loved Steve. Mm-hmm. His generosity was absolutely boundless, be that to his friends and indeed as a mentor, because professionally speaking, Steve gave his time to countless young musical theatre writers, some of whom, like Lin-Manuel Miranda, for instance, the composer of Hamilton, went on to global success. The composer Adam Gettel is also one of Steve's protégés. But we've been speaking to people who perhaps aren't as well known as those, but have got fascinating stories to tell. For instance, we've reunited 10 of Steve's protégés from his Oxford masterclass, the only time Steve was ever officially a teacher in 1990. He was a visiting professor at Oxford University. We've been able to chat to his household staff, such as his housekeeper and his chef, about who the man was when he was relaxed at home. He was also very shy. Julie Andrews spoke to us about this. John Kander, the composer of Cabaret in Chicago, also spoke to us about this. And in Steve's emails to me, which are voiced by the BAFTA winner Alistair McGowan, who's playing Stephen Sondheim, he spoke about how shy he was. Steve and I bonded over a shared love of obscure old movies. And he confided to me that while he was completely at ease with major stars like Humphrey Bogart, with whom he got on terribly well, he was shy and starstruck around obscure character actors, people so obscure they didn't even get billing in the movies they were made. And it's this lovable person we wanted to share with the world.
Oh, he particularly liked the actress Margaret Sullivan, didn't he?
He did. Margaret Sullivan, a great star of 1930s and 40s Hollywood. And in episode 3, which was released last week, the podcast is available on all streaming platforms, and episode 3 is dedicated to Steve's love of movies. And we premiere 2 songs Steve wrote in his very early 20s, which are homages to Margaret Sullivan and all the ways that she died melodramatically in her movies. Because very rarely did Margaret Sullivan make it out of a movie alive. And Steve wrote these 2 fantastic songs, which we've been privileged by courtesy of the Stephen Sondheim Trust to premiere in their first official recordings.
Oh, that's wonderful. How lovely to be able to do that. What a privilege.
It was indeed. These were songs which Steve kindly shared with me during his lifetime, so be able to now share them with the world is very special indeed.
Yes. And how has it been for both you and Peter to be speaking to, you mentioned Julie Andrews. People like her must have been amazing. Again, a privilege.
We've been extremely fortunate to speak to so many incredible people, all of whom have given their time so freely and generously because of their love for Steve. And Peter as well, this is a big thing for him because he is sharing his story of life and love with Steve for the first time in over 25 years. The romantic relationship they shared was a great meeting of minds and hearts. And when the romance ended, they remained the closest of friends. And there are very, very few people in the world who knew Stephen Sondheim better than Peter Jones. So to hear his memories of their relationship and also just Steve as a person generally is a real privilege, which, I think the world will be very surprised and indeed very moved by the beautiful stories which Peter has to share.
Oh, nice. And lovely for them to have stayed close friends afterwards. That doesn't always happen, of course, with relationship breakdowns, does it? So that says a lot about them both, I think.
There was a great deal of love there. And yes, indeed, it does say a great deal about them both. And their beautiful relationship is preserved for the first time on our podcast, which is an extreme privilege.
Oh, wonderful. Can you give us a little insight on what Peter's said about Steve?
Oh, well, you'll have to tune in for that, but you will find that Peter calls it the meeting of minds and hearts, which it really, really was. Certainly the greatest meeting of minds, the way they got on musically and just connected as people. Steve was a beautiful old soul. Peter is as well. So I like to think I'm an old soul. And because I connected with Steve over these old movies, we were both privileged, Peter and I, to know Steve in ways which perhaps other people weren't, but we now feel that it's a real joy to be able to share the real Stephen Sondheim. People have called Steve the Shakespeare of musical theatre. So as long as musicals are being written and produced hundreds of years from now, they'll still be talking about Sondheim. So Loving You, the Untold Sondheim podcast has been a real chance to preserve once and for all the real person that Stephen Sondheim actually was.
Yes, lovely. So how did the two of you have this bond over old movies? How did that happen?
Well, I performed in Steve's 85th birthday gala at Drury Lane, and it was a mashup medley which I co-wrote with my then colleague. And Steve liked it very much, so he invited us round for drinks at his townhouse in New York. And during the course of conversation, I made a passing reference to old movies, and he couldn't believe that I knew the people that I did. We started trading stories about our favourite film stars from obscure 1940s movies, and it really all went from there. He loved Margaret Sullivan, he loved Jean Arthur, he loved Lily Palmer, a great European star of British and Hollywood movies. And there really wasn't an obscure movie which Steve didn't know. And even approaching 90, he could still recall the names of all the cast, the directors, the studios from which the film was released. It was an encyclopedic knowledge, and we would test each other. We would send each other movie puzzles via email. And I would have all these emails pinging through to me in the early hours of the morning, which of course is evening time in New York. And Steve's mind was working fantastically, and I learned a great deal from him as a professional, but also as a person. And his friendship has changed my life, Peter's life, and so many people's. Julie Andrews in our first episode speaks so eloquently and movingly about how Steve, as she says, it's rare that someone gets into your soul so firmly, she says. And that really is indicative of the love which comes through from so many people. Yeah. And Mia Farrow, for instance, was one of his best friends for 50 years. What she has to say about him is truly beautiful and moving.
Oh, and Bernadette Peters, she worked with him a lot in her career, hasn't she?
Oh, she did. Well, Steve considered Bernadette one of his definitive interpreters. And the chat, I'm not going to give anything away, but the chat we have with Bernadette is really, really quite something. And she, like so many people, just loved talking about him. So we asked our guests to think of it not as an interview, but as a chat. And because so many of them had so much history with Peter over the last 30 years, and I think and hope because they knew that I was close to Steve as well, they really just chatted amongst mutual friends, and we spoke about somebody that we knew and loved personally, which makes them very different conversations to the types which you might hear on an official television chat show, for instance.
Yeah.
We said, right, let's just get together and have a chat about Steve.
Yeah, lovely. And for such big names to be more than happy to be involved and to speak to you, again, says a lot about their love for Steve.
Yes, all we had to do was say, we would like to chat to you about Steve, and they were there. They all understood that this was a labour of love being made for the right reasons, and therefore so generously offered their time, and indeed things for their archives. Without meaning to give anything away, but on episode 1, there is a special recording of Julie Andrews singing something incredibly special for Steve. And it's the first time that recording's been heard publicly. It's something she made for him privately. But there it is. And we were talking about it in her chat, and she offered it to us. And that's the kind of love and generosity which these people have been showing. And it's been truly wonderful and a great privilege to spend time with all these wonderful people chatting to them about Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah, how special. I guess it's made you and Peter realise that this was a good idea.
Yes, indeed. Fortunately so. It's been the most wonderful. It's been 2 years in production, and it's been the most wonderful, incredible, professional 2 years of my life. It's been terrific.
Lovely. So how many episodes will there be?
There are 12 episodes in total, all of them about an hour long. And we dropped the first episode on March the 5th, and we're going through until May the 21st.
Amazing. So people can download it from all the usual podcast apps and sites. All
usual streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify, Amazon. You can find Loving You, The Untold Sondheim, wherever you get your podcasts.
Wonderful stuff. Martin Milnes, thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to chat with you again.
It's been an absolute privilege, Hannah. Thank you so much.